You need winners? Let the pros show you how to make money. General Manager Al DeMarco, a regular contributor on Fox Sports, MSNBC, and Comcast Sports TV, brings over 25 years of handicapping experience to the table. CEO Steve Budin, the author of Bets, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, is the man responsible for creating the online betting industry. Together, they lead PickNation.com, your #1 source for winners.
Well, we have made it the final Sunday of the NFL regular season, and the Pick Nation Report ready to bring you all of your winners today. And this, I've got to tell you, is without a doubt the toughest Sunday of the season. It's no different in many aspects from betting and trying to analyze preseason football because so many teams have nothing to play for. You don't know what the player rotations are going to be, which coaches are going to try to win, which coaches are going to be trying to rest their players in anticipation of the upcoming playoffs. So there's a lot to be considered. And this, of course, is the show that you've got to watch because we are the only NFL pregame show that break down all your games from a point spread perspective. I'm Al DeMarco along with Steve Budin. I've been a professional sports handicapper for over 25 years. Steve, former bookmaker, the guy who literally created the offshore sports book betting industry.
That's absolutely right. I mean, Al, when I went offshore in 1994 and took a bet, it was the first time in the history that anyone had ever bet offshore. Now I've switched sides and I'm advising gamblers all over the country who to bet on and how much.
Right, and I think that the interesting part about this show, and we've mentioned it many times, for those of you that are newcomers to it, is that we have the yin and yang in terms of the perspective of the games. I look at the games from a personnel matchup, how the teams face each other on the field. That's what matters to me, not all that computer mumbo-jumbo that you hear a lot of handicappers talk about, because, you know, trends are interesting only from a talking point standpoint, because you find me 10 trends at backside A, I can find you 15 that backside B. It's all the matter of how we twist and turn the numbers. I rather, as a former sports reporter, look at the knowledge that I've gained in 25 plus years of doing this in terms of the matchups. Can one team stop the run? Can one team get pressure on the quarterback? Ultimately, games are won in the trenches. And I think coming into the playoffs, the biggest thing is, can teams run the ball? Can they play defense? And then the final thing would be, can they put pressure on opposing quarterbacks? You, of course, as you said, a former bookmaker, you've seen the suckers make their plays over the years. You look at the lines in terms of, you know, that phrase that you hear so many times, are the odds makers trying to tell you something? They're not trying to tell you
They're
something.
Trying to tell you what the public thinks.
Yeah, exactly. But you look at it from a different perspective because you sit there and you look at the lines from a bookmaker's perspective still.
Yeah, and the one thing that we know as bookmakers and as a former bookmaker is that all those great trends and all those great statistics are fine and dandy, but they all go into the line. So these are things that gamblers and linesmakers look at, you know, prior to these lines coming out. So no real big advantage on continuing to go over all the trends and all the stats. You know, what I find, oddly enough, is that in this business, a lot of it still comes down to your gut and who's got the better gut feeling and the better instinct as a gambler than the other guy. And I think that in the end of the day is what makes guys win.
And there's a certain amount of luck that goes into it as well. I mean, you know, there's a reason we call them backdoor covers. We've certainly seen our share in the past month. It happens sometimes, and sometimes you sit there and go, geez, I just got screwed. Other times you sit there and what a lucky win. And you're right, though. Sometimes I always have felt that, you know, ultimately I can analyze both teams from any perspective, but still it's got to be a gut instinct. And sometimes it's like stepping up to the craps table. You're feeling it. You know you're hot. The dice are hot in your hands. And the same thing. You know, I've always maintained that in 25 years of doing that, as a professional handicapper, you get on the same winning and losing streak sometimes that the players and the teams that you're handicapping. When you are riding a hot streak, that's when you press it. That's when you raise your bets. That's when you go for the jugular.
And I think, like players in the sport and gamblers alike, I think that they have to put themselves in the right position to get lucky. So when that luck comes around, you know, their bankroll, their money management, all of those things have put them in the type of position to take advantage of that luck. So it's not just luck. I think it comes down to skill as well.
Well, we are going to talk about future plays in terms of the odds of winning the AFC and NFC championship, of winning the Super Bowl. We've got one of the top handicappers in the nation at PickNation.com. In fact, Trace Adams coming up. We're going to break down some games, but first, we're going to head to the phones, and our first caller is from Fort Myers, Florida, and it is Scott, who wants to talk about the Steelers and Browns game. How you doing, Scott?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, Howard. How about yourself?
Good. So which side do you like here, Pittsburgh, or are you going to go with the Cleveland Browns and probably Eric Mangini's swan song there?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm a Steelers fan for 25 years, and the last time they played each other was 28-10. I kind of like the Steelers to blow them out in this game to keep their position as the North champs.
You know, growing up as a Jet fan in New York in the 70s and 80s, we were always forced to adopt a team come playoff time. So everyone in my neighborhood, you know, half the neighborhood was on Dallas and half the neighborhood was on Pittsburgh. A lot of great memories with Pittsburgh. If you believe in the motivation factor at all, I think you got to love Pittsburgh here, trying to hold on to the bye in the playoffs, coming up against a Cleveland team that I think is finally going to get rid of Mangini. You could believe that, you know, he's playing for his job here, but I don't see it that way. I think he's done. I like Pittsburgh minus the 6 here.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised at how cheap the price is in this game, because it's not like Mangini is beloved by his team or by the city of Cleveland.
Correct.
Maybe even not by Mike Holmgren, who's ultimately going to decide his job fate. And this is a Browns team that's lost its last 3 games on the field. It's failed to cover 6 of its last 7. And the Steelers may or may not have Troy Polamalu, probably not going to have him. But let's face it, you know, the Steelers also have the benefit of playing previously on Thursday night, took care of business, rebounded on a short week from the Jets' loss at home, and really dominated an overmatched Carolina team, which is what you want to see. A good team dominate a weaker opponent late in the season, and now they have another chance to do so here today. I don't think this is a game that you're going to see Mike Tomlin calling off the horses. You know,
Correct.
I mean, you know, I think that they're going to want to come through. And the thing is, this Browns team going with Colt McCoy at quarterback, can the Steelers get pressure on him? Can they also stop Peyton Hillis, who looks like he's kind of worn down here from all the carries, really in his rookie season, the first time he's ever seen extensive playing action? And you've got the number 1 rushing defense in the NFL with the Steelers. They're only giving up an average of like 60 yards a game.
It'll be interesting for me to see if Pittsburgh gets back to basics and becomes that defensive stronghold that they were in the first half of the season. If they do, they can contend for a title.
Okay, next we're going to head to Tampa, Florida, where Danny is going to be joining us. Wants to talk about his Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New Orleans Saints. Of course, the Saints putting themselves in a great position by rebounding from the road loss at Baltimore in a shocking fashion, winning at Atlanta, ending the Falcons' 8-game winning streak on Monday night. Tampa Bay, of course, looked very impressive, but then again, last week, Josh Freeman with the 4 TD passes was only facing the Seattle Seahawks.
This is true.
Dan, which way do you like here? Laying the points with the Bucks or with the Saints, or grabbing them with the Bucks, who have been a great road play this season?
I think it's going to be a hard game for the Bucks, guys. I think I have to go with the Saints.
Really? See, I love Tampa Bay in these situations when they're getting a lot of points on the road. I've always, this whole year, we've talked about how dangerous they were. And then finally, the lines makers caught up to them. And, you know, they at home, you know, as a small favorite, we didn't like them as much. But getting 8.5 points here against a New Orleans team that, you know, everyone's back on the bandwagon after the win in Atlanta. But, you know, I had Atlanta in that game, and I can tell you that that game was about as lucky as you could get. Atlanta certainly lost that game. I don't really look at it as New Orleans winning that game. So I think this line is a little hyped up here. I think 8.5 is a little too much. If Atlanta won that game, New Orleans would probably be 6.5. I'm going to take the value here with Tampa Bay and try to squeak out the backdoor cover.
I think you have to lay the points. I've got to differ with you here because, you know, you've got a New Orleans team that obviously has a lot to play for in this game, and they dominated the first meeting in Tampa Bay, 31-6, playing on grass. Now they're back inside in the Dome, 475 yards in the first meeting. I know Tampa Bay has covered 9 of its last 10 on the road dating back to last season. But, you know, again, look at when Tampa Bay takes on a quality team. They lose to Baltimore by 7.
Right.
They lose to Atlanta twice this season. You know, they get hammered by the Saints in the first go-round.
Yep.
They get crushed by Pittsburgh. They have not beaten a quality winning team, as far as I'm concerned, all season long. And on the road, you know, it's easy to cover 9 out of 10 when you're either getting a lot of points against Baltimore or you're beating up like the Redskins, the Niners, the Arizona Cardinals,
right,
the Cincinnati Bengals, the Carolina Panthers. You know, 5 easy wins there for you. So I'd have to go the other way, and I think that you have to definitely lay the points with the Saints.